Welcome to the channel, where today we dive into the chilling world of real-life paranormal encounters shared by eyewitnesses on Reddit. From ghostly apparitions to unexplainable events, these stories will make you question everything you thought you knew about reality. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on any of these spine-tingling tales. History 1. Hi guys, my name is Jake, and I want to tell you about a creepy experience I had a few years ago. I've never been a big fan of the paranormal. On the contrary, I've always been a skeptic, ridiculing all these ghost stories. But one day, my view of the world changed dramatically. It all started when I moved to a small town in New England. I worked remotely, so I chose a house for myself somewhere in the suburbs, where no one bothers. The house was old, built in the early 1900s. It was spacious, with a large plot of land, and it seemed like the perfect place for a quiet life. The first night after moving in, I couldn't sleep. Maybe it was because I wasn't used to the new place, or because the house was too quiet. I was lying in bed, just trying to relax, when I heard a strange sound. It came from the next room, where I hadn't had time to put all my things out yet. It was a low whisper. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but then the sound was repeated. I tensed up and sat up in bed, listening. The whispers grew louder and clearer. I couldn't make out exactly what was being said, but I was sure it was a human voice. My heart started beating faster. I decided to check where the sound is coming from. He turned on the flashlight on his phone and slowly walked into that room. The room was dark, with only moonlight filtering through the old curtains. There was no sound anymore. I looked all over the room, checked every corner, but found nothing suspicious. Calming down a bit, I went back to bed, hoping that it was just a figment of my imagination. But that was just the beginning. The next night I heard the whisper again. This time it sounded closer. It was as if someone was standing by my bed and quietly saying some words. I couldn't even make out a single word, but the very sound made me shudder. On the third night, the whisper turned into a barely audible scream. It no longer sounded like a figment of the imagination or the usual sounds of an old house. The scream sounded right above my head, as if someone was at the ceiling and shouting at me. I couldn't stand it and ran out of the house to the car, where I sat until morning. As a result, I couldn't stay in this house anymore and moved in a month later. Even years later, I can't explain what it was. Every time I hear a quiet whisper or scream, I immediately remember those nights. It was real, I'm sure of it. And maybe I was just lucky to get out of there in one piece. History 2. Hi, my name is Sam. I've always been interested in the paranormal, but I never thought I'd come face to face with it. This story happened to me 2 years ago when I decided to spend a vacation at my grandparents' old house. This house has always been a bit creepy. It stood in the depths of the forest, far from civilization, and it always seemed that someone was watching you. When I was a child, this house seemed to me a mystical place full of secrets and hidden corners. But as an adult, I realized that the house is just old, and maybe that's what creates the atmosphere of mystery. Therefore, when I was offered to stay there for a week, I agreed without hesitation. The first few days passed quietly. I was enjoying the silence and nature until one evening something strange happened. I was sitting in the living room when I suddenly heard a loud bang of the door. I jumped up and looked around, but all the doors and windows were closed. It was strange, but I didn't think much of it, putting it down to the old house and its sounds. The next day I went for a walk around the neighborhood, and when I returned, I noticed that something was wrong in the house. Things in the kitchen were scattered, as if someone had walked around the room, opening all the cupboards and drawers. I searched the whole house, but found no signs of forced entry, nor any signs of the presence of strangers. That evening, something happened that made me really think that there might be something invisible in this house. I went to bed, but I woke up from a strange feeling. It was like someone was standing at the head of my bed and looking at me. I opened my eyes and really saw a dark figure in the corner of the room. This figure was blurred like a shadow, but definitely had a human outline. She stood motionless, and I couldn't look away. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I literally froze in fear. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt tight and I couldn't make a sound. Then the figure began to move. She slowly approached me, and then disappeared, as if she had disappeared into thin air. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was it real, or was my imagination playing tricks on me? I spent the rest of the night with the lights on, unable to fall asleep again. The next day I left this house, deciding never to return there. I told this story to my friends, but no one believed me. Maybe I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't experienced it myself. History 3. Hi, my name is Ellie. I want to share with you a story that happened to me when I was about 16 years old. It happened in our old house where I grew up. The house was built at the beginning of the 20th century, and perhaps this place really kept some secrets. I stayed home alone that night. My parents went away for the weekend, and I decided that nothing terrible would happen if I stayed and watched movies all night long. The house was quiet, and the only light source was the TV screen. Around midnight, I heard a strange sound coming from the attic. It sounded like footsteps, like someone walking on a wooden floor. At first I thought it was rats or some other animal, but then the footsteps became clearer and heavier. It was too loud for the rats. I tried to ignore the sound, but it wouldn't stop. On the contrary, the footsteps began to approach, as if someone was coming down the stairs from the attic. My heart started pounding. I took the flashlight and headed for the attic stairs. Fear gripped me, but I couldn't just sit and wait for something to enter my room. When I went up to the attic, there was no one there. However, I noticed that there were footprints on the floor, as if someone had walked in the dust. These footprints led to the corner of the attic where the old chest stood. This chest was always there, and I never paid attention to it. With shaking hands, I opened the chest. There was nothing special inside except old books and photographs. But one of the photos caught my attention. It showed a woman standing in the same room where I was now. She looked exactly like the figure I saw in the attic. I immediately slammed the trunk shut and ran back downstairs, feeling something unbearably creepy pressing down on me. I couldn't stay in this house alone anymore. The next morning, I called my parents and told them that I was going to a friend's house because I couldn't stay in this house anymore. I have not returned to the attic since. My family sold the house a few years later, and I still don't know what it was. But sometimes when I think back to that night, I get the feeling that someone is still watching me.